We're holding line uh, 4. I'm sorry. We are holding on line 6. And we were talking about the idea of how our the level of the war that there is between the Nafsh Lakis and the Nafsh Bahamis. That's the concept that it says. The Padavashal Nafshi, we're going to lead into that, Mikrovli, from a battle. And we started speaking about different ways how the war takes place between the Nafsh Lakis and the Nafsh Bahamis. One of the ways that the war takes place between Nafsh Lakis and Nafsh Bahamis, we explained, is that it's necessary that the Nefesh Lakis should become enclosed and involved in the Nefesh Bahamis, not that it should stand aloof and apart and not engage with the Nefesh Bahamis at all, because then it could be that when he will not be involved in his spiritual pursuits, so then he will fall from his level. So that's what it says, that even when that it should be liboy lamaila, his heart should be above, but ein of lamata, he has to know how to engage with the nafsh bahamis. He has to make this relevant to the nafsh bahamis as well. So now the Rebbe is going to bring this back to the topic about krav. Shalom nafshi mikravli. That the idea of krav is expressed in this thing that we just now said. Line 6, page 10. This is the idea that the general concept of the service of the Eibishter is called a battle, mikravli, from those that were battling me. There's two explanations in the word krav. First of all, a battle, meaning the idea of war. Gam l'shoin kiruv, it also means closeness, which seem to be contradictory. War shows on the opposite of closeness. In the simple sense, we're talking about hand-to-hand combat, not something from afar, not something from a distance, but it's engaging with the person. But still, closeness and battle and war seem to be the opposite. The Rebbe goes on line 9, the idea behind this is the battle, the war of the godly soul, in opposition to the body and the animal soul. Has to be in a way of closeness. Behind this means it shouldn't be in a way that he's disengaged, removed from the Nefesh Bahamis. Why is he disengaged from Nefesh Bahamis? Because he's totally invested and totally involved in godly comprehensions, like we spoke about yesterday, without being involved at all with refining and purifying the body and the animal soul. That is not the ultimate purpose. Previously, we spoke about not because of purpose, but because it could be that afterwards he will fall. After his being involved in his very high spiritual levels, when he comes face to face with his body and his nafsha bahamis, it could be that afterwards he will fall. But the Rebbe also said before another thing, that the ultimate purpose is b'chol d'rachecha. The intention is that you should know the Eibishter in your ways. In other words, when you're dealing with things that have to do with the physical body, with the animal soul. If the person doesn't engage the animal soul and doesn't engage the body in explaining to it about godliness and so on, so then when he's engaged in physical matters, they're not with the program. They don't feel the godliness. Line 15, the ultimate purpose is liyos mikravli, that it should be mikra, meaning should be a war in a way of closeness. In such a way that his eyes are downward, that we explained yesterday, that eyes downward means that he's focused on bringing this to the nefesh bahamis, into the body. Through his eyes being focused on the nefesh bahamis, he also affects not just an ascent in the godly soul when he's involved in davening and his spiritual pursuits, elagam birur v'zichuk, but rather also a refinement and a purification. Achar kach gam ilui, and even more so afterwards, an ascent and an elevation by guf and Shabbamis in the body and the animal soul. So the Rebbe says, practically speaking, line 20, Yoniv avoid kipshuto, this idea, and avoid in the simple sense is when we are demanding from a Yid to be involved in understanding godliness. Like the Pasuk says, you should know the God of your father. It has to be in such a way that following this, as it says immediately, continuing that in the Pasuk, that the culmination and the continuation of knowing the God of your father is to serve him with a whole heart, meaning that this permeates his day-to-day life. All the matters in comprehension of godliness and in love and awe. He has to draw them down. In such types of letters, meaning in such type of language and expressions, that it could be received, it could be something that's accepted. Also in human intellect, that the ideas, the great lofty ideas that a person studies about and the person feels in his love and awe, he needs to translate it in terms and expressions and concepts that the Nefesh HaBahamis can understand as well. I've mentioned this before, that my Mashpia, Mel Tzibol Bashalom, used to say that a person needs to explain to his Nefesh HaBahamis concepts of Chassidus as if he would be explaining it to someone, a Miftzayim, let's say, or Lahavlav Havdalas to a non-Jew. So when if that same type of explanation, that type of language, that type of descent of the ideas is the way he has to explain it to the Nefesh HaBahamis. And through the intermediary of the intellect, through using the intellect as a means to bring these things down to the world of Nefesh HaBahamis, top of page Yud. So then it will reach also the body and the animal soul. Therefore, he has to be in a way that he's close to them. Though, because of this, the person needs to separate himself from his cleaving and love and awe. In other words, to be able to connect with the animal soul and the body, to relate to them, and to find the words and the language to deal with them, he needs to stop for a moment his great and lofty levels, to be able to affect the refinement and the purification in his body and his animal soul. And when he does that, and automatically also that part of the world that he comes in contact with, that has been a portion to him, that has been allotted to him as his mission to elevate, will also be elevated as well, because he is going and approaching them in a totally new way of connection, in a way that relates to them, relates to the body, relates to the animal soul. Another a good example of this as well is that a person teaching children, whether their own children, whether their grandchildren, whether other children that they see around, the way to be able to teach them is a person needs to leave his own thoughts and his own feelings behind his lofty levels, and he needs to find the words and the ideas that relate to the child and to communicate to the child on the child's level what the child needs to hear. Now, the child doesn't always have to be a 5-year-old, because sometimes be talking about a teenager, for example, that can be more difficult. An adolescent can be more difficult, etc. So we need to look for the language and the ways, even though it means I need to remove myself from my holy activities and I'm involved in learning and in davening and so on, and find the words and find the ideas that'll be able to communicate this further. Any questions before we go on to Izdal? Okay, line 6, page Yud. So once we've established that the way we need to do it is in the way of krav. We cannot be removed from the goof. We cannot be removed from the nefesh habahamis. We have to be in a close battle. We have to engage with them. So in that itself, in that engaging with the goof and the nefesh habahamis, the Rebbe is going to talk about, there's two general ways of engaging with them. There's the way of engaging with them in a way of war, and engaging in them in a way of menucha, of calmness, of peace, etc. Oizdal. Is of goof, and this avoid itself of engaging with the nefesh habahamis in the body. Yes, there are two approaches. Derech milchama in a way of war, or in a way of rest and peace and relaxation and being calmness, etc. The first way is in the way of war. The highness means when he establishes that the order of the avodah is in such a way of that it's measured and bounded, it's limited. In other words, he's going to take this only so far. He's engaging with the nefesh habahamis. He says, I can't go overboard. I need to limit myself. So his entire war is in a limited fashion. In general, what type of avodah is a type of avodah that is in a limited way, in a bounded way. That's not avodah that's according to reason and intellect. He enters into all different types of complaints and responses. To understand and explain that godliness is something good in general, and also it's also good for him. Sometimes you could talk about how something is good, but that's like very removed. Then we have to bring it down and say, kirbas alakim li toiv, it's good for me. It's something that's beneficial for me. So the person is engaging with a whole discussion and back and forth and a debate and so on. Is godliness good? Is gashmis good? And so on. Since this idea about the goodness of Alakus and so on. So there are always two approaches. There is the approach either on one line, one approach, and then there's an opposite approach. So therefore, since intellect has all these different approaches, so then it allows room for the complaints of the other side that Chas v'Shalom want to distance godliness. Since there are complaints from the other side, a person needs to enter into a war. What does that mean to enter into a war? Needs to work on convincing the other side. To put an effort that his ideas that he's putting forward should overcome and conquer the ideas that the other side is putting forward. The key between the ethnicity and the smart and the connected. Since he made room for the other side, that the other side should also put forth its complaints, because there's a discussion, there's a give and take. Similar to what says the Chazal, that by Beinim, this one and that one judges. And Alter Rebbe explains what's it mean, judges. By the Beinani, this side, the Nefesh Elokis says its opinion, and this side, the Nefesh habahamis says its opinion. So the problem with that is, even if he is victorious for now, since this victory comes as a result of a war, and prior to his victory, there was a time frame that the animal soul had some type of grasp and had some type of hold, because he put forth his ideas and his reasoning and so on. So because there is room also for the nefesh habahamis, so even after the victory, then it could be after time, it could awaken again the ideas of nefesh habahamis. Is a term used in Yeridea concerning when a kosher item, when non-kosher is mixed in with kosher, and it comes in this battle, but then afterwards it can If other non-kosher items mix in, so then that could be awakened again. Yaschel oid, and you'll continue. You begin again. Top of page Yural oida pamas calling mitkolosai. You will begin from the beginning. It's a very interesting expression that he says from the beginning. I notice sometimes when I have to talk to people online, when they come ask me different questions about Yiddishkeit. Sometimes it turns out that they are missionaries or something like that. So it's like talking to the wall. You explain them the thing, and then they just go to something else, and then later on they'll come right back to what we were talking about before that we already thought was over and done with. The Nefesh Habahamis is that way. The Nefesh Habahamis is, okay, you won me this round, but then I'm going to come back with the same things that I said before. I thought we dealt with this already. We already convinced you about this. There's no. What are we reiterating this? But that's the nature of Nefesh Habahamis. Nefesh Habahamis had a foothold. We allowed him room, and once we allowed him room, so then you can come back again. Additional to that, it also reminds me of something else that says I think the Rebbe Nashab would learn Moed Nevuchim backwards. What do I mean backwards? He would first learn the answers in the Moed Nevuchim, and then he would in the Rambam's Guide to the Perplexed, and then he would learn the questions, because he said he doesn't want to be one moment a nifred from the Eibishter in his thought and have questions on the Eibishter. It's similar to what he said before, that the Nefesh Habahamis opposing and putting forth its tightness causes a tfisa and achiza of the Nefesh Habahamis. Nefesh Habahamis takes hold. Okay, so that is one way of dealing with the Nefesh Habahamis in a way of war. Top of page Aleph, line 1. The second way of dealing with Nefesh Habahamis is in a way of rest. Behind this means though he's not in a way of separation, totally to be involved just in spiritual matters. In other words, not like what we spoke about in the previous ois, that someone is completely divorced from the world. Nefesh Habahamis doesn't even engage in Nefesh Habahamis, is just in spiritual ideas and love and awe of Hashem. So we're not talking about that. His avoid is in such a way that he is in close battle. Shekasher Maguf and Nefesh Habahamis fully connected with the body, the animal soul, and the kalma. We're still in all ains of boif and shenichnis in mind, but highness and minus. It's not in such a way that he enters into the Nefesh Habahamis with different types of complaints and responses and so on. And he establishes his service by intellect and reason and knowledge and so on. Because then when you're entering into a type of discussion in that type of way, so like we said before, then the Nefesh Habahamis in the body could also propose their views, like we said before. But rather, what is the way in the way of Menucha? He goes with full force, and the power of his will, the power of his delight. It's impossible in another manner. It's like sometimes we see in the negative in Klippa that someone that enjoys something very much, you can't reason with the person. You can't tell the person, this makes no sense. This is what I enjoy. The Reimanishkin cup, this is all I want to hear about. This is all I want to know. This is where my desire is. This is where my enjoyment is. This is where my will is. I don't care about any of the discussions. The same thing, everything that there's to be found in Klippa is obviously Meruba Midatoyu and Midaparanias. It's so much greater, the good measure than the bad measure. That a person in Kedusha can have such a powerful desire and enjoyment and pleasure and will that there's nothing that can stand against it. There is no intellectual argument over here that it can be posed against it, because it just doesn't make a difference. This is what I'm invested in. The Klolus Abidasi, the Kavda Seita, generals avoid there's no line of doing good. In increasing and a lot of light, just in other words, adding the powerful light of Nefesh Elokis, without allowing any room whatsoever to the existence of bad, the clippers on the other side, that there's no room for them whatsoever by him. When a person affects within himself in his miniature world to establish his avoid in such a manner, then automatically the opposing side does not have any type of way of grasping and grabbing hold. It has no handhold. It has no purchase on the nefshalakis. But the other side has no value. It does not take up any space, does not have any existence whatsoever. Therefore, the avodah is done in a way of rest. There's no battle, there's no war. Therefore, he doesn't have to be fearful of the enemy. It's not in such a way that the enemy exists, but he overcame his enemy. The way it is in avodah by reason, that when there's that reason type of discussion and so on, so then that view, that's my view, and my view will overcome the other. But it's not that way over here. The enemy has no existence whatsoever. What was explained previously is kosher is that it has to be connected with the body and the animal soul. And to be close to them and to affect them. Seemingly, if I'm not engaging with them intellectually and I'm just showing that my full force of my delight and my enjoyment and godliness, seemingly that's also ignoring the nefesh habahamis. It's also ignoring the body. So how do we say that this, we want to have, it's menucha, but it's also karav. We said it has to be in closeness to the body and the animal soul, because that's the purpose, to transform it and to elevate it and so on. So the Rebbe says, in such a case where he affects it with the full force of his will and his delight, in this avoid in a way of a rest. Top of page Yud it's in such a manner that he affects upon them. Not only will there not be any opponents, that just the opposite, that the enemy is transformed to a friend, that the nefesh habahamis and the body assist the person in the service of the Eibishter. So he is engaging, he is in a way of closeness, and that closeness is so powerful that it can even transform the nefesh habahamis. Now the Rebbe goes on further to explain that these two approaches is also expressed in the different avoidance of Shabbos versus the days of the week. Line 4, page Yud Bey. This general difference between the two types of avodah that we mentioned before, the way of a war and the way of peace and tranquility. It's like the difference between the avodah of the 6 days of the week to the avodah on Shabbos. Because during the weekday, the avodah is no way of war. This is what the Torah says as a mandate. It's something you should do. 6 days, you should work, not just 6 days, you're allowed to work. What does that mean that you should work? That a person needs to occupy themselves and be involved with mundane matters. To be able to be involved in mundane and weekday matters, a person needs to descend to matters of this world, to become enclosed in them, not to be removed in his spiritual ivory tower. Though one would say that this is considered like someone that makes a signal and a circle in the air in front of the king, how can a person do so? Also, the king is prohibited to do so in front of the king, and a person could endanger his life by a human king that way. So where do I have the right to go ahead in the mundane activities of the weekdays? Kalmak still no not Torah Rishus the Gamsi with the Torah gave permission and also a command to Afal Pishaim Kama Malchut. Though all the time, even during the week, I'm standing in front of the king. Tzrichim Lisasik moved in the Chayil. I need to be involved in mundane matters. And that's the avoid of refining the sparks. Through plowing and sowing. In the chula, etc. In kol protein yom the tanasadur the past naked. These are all the specific matters. Then Masechtas Shabbos, where he enumerates the prohibited work and labor on Shabbos, he goes according to the order. He begins with the order of how bread is made. He starts with plowing, and then he goes the next step, the next step, next step, whatever, until the bread is baked. The bread is baked. And then he talks about other malachs as well. Akshudim, so all these things of planting and sowing, etc., is connected. Not just with doing good, like we spoke about before, that the avoida of rotzen and tainug and just the full force of the desire and love of nefesh elokis overcomes the nefesh habahamis and transforms the nefesh habahamis. He's not engaging with the bad. It's only doing good. But over here, where a person's in the weekdays and he's dealing with avodas habirudim, so it's ela gamim surmara. He's also dealing with turning away from bad. He's dealing with the mundane things of this world that some of them need to be, you need to remove yourself from. Like explain about Ella, despite the fact that he's dealing with the world and he's dealing with berudim and so on, eventually he's victorious. And he transforms from all this labor bread that the heart of a person is supported by it and satisfied from it. What does that mean spiritually? That he's transforming all these physical labors to holiness. Some through refining and purifying and elevating them. That is all the weekday. When we call Malcolm still on top of page of Gimel, since his avoid is in such a way that he's being victorious in a war. What does that mean, a war? When you're dealing with a war, temporarily, like we said before, there was a time of concealment and covering. And even undoing that concealment and covering is no way of a war. When you're doing a war, when you're dealing with a war, you're allowing room and you're allowing the other side to grab on. Then it's possible for the bad to return and be awakened, like we said earlier. Therefore, it's not the ultimate perfection of a person's service. What's higher than this, the avoid of Shabbos? We know that we cannot choose on Shabbos, which means we cannot refine the sparks on Shabbos. That's what it means spiritually. The boyer is also. Rather, Shabbos is the avoid of delighting on Avaya. Delight is the opposite of war, like we spoke before. And with the great power and delight of the nefesh elokis, it overcomes and transforms the nefesh habahamis. So avoid the that's avoid in a way of rest. That's what it says in the pasuk. He redeemed me in peace from those that battled me. Though the avoid has to be in a way of a battling. What does that mean, battling? Like we said before, a person cannot be removed and disengaged from the nefesh habahamis to be totally immersed in a godly comprehension without a type of bond and joining with the body and the animal soul. That is an incorrect way. It has to be mikrav. A person needs to be in a way that's close to them and to affect them. Still in all. It's not that he's affecting them in a way of a war, but rather in a way of rest. So, that idea of redeeming in peace. The peace shows that it's in a way of menucha, it's a way of rest, it's in a way that he is just with his full force of the revelation of nefesh elokis. It transforms the nefesh habahamis to be on the right track. Any questions?